Hi, everyone. Welcome to the YouthActionNet virtual learning series. My name is Jessie Ellisberg. I'm Director of Content Development for International Youth Foundation. The International Youth Foundation, since 1990, has been preparing young people to be healthy, productive, and engaged as citizens. We do this through a wide array of programs, including YouthActionNet, which supports young social entrepreneurs on their leadership and social innovation journeys. As part of our support, we host a virtual learning series covering a range of topics on leadership and organizational management. Today's session is in our Gaining, Training, and Retaining Talent series, and it's focusing on managing remote teams. I'd like to take a moment to thank our partners who made this series possible, American Express Foundation and Laureate International Universities. I'm really excited to be joined by three wonderful guests today. We have Yvonna Stevens, Interim CFO of International Youth Foundation. Yvonna has been with IYF since 2001, playing a variety of finance roles, including managing the International Finance Unit and providing support to all of our field offices. So she's got lots of experience working with remote staff across lots of different time zones. We're also joined by Ehsan Gul, who's co-founder of Greenbox. Greenbox is a social venture that's a youth-led think tank encouraging youth in Pakistan to both value and take action for sustainable development. In addition to running Greenbox with his twin brother, Ehsan is an Atlas Corp Fellow who is completing his year-long fellowship here at IYF in the United States. Last but not least, we have Nigel Savel, co-founder of 9 Miles Project. 9 Miles Project is a social venture that uses the medium of surfing to create safe spaces for opportunity and skill building of youth at risk in coastal communities of South Africa. Nigel is a 2018 Mandela Washington Fellow and is completing his professional development experience here at IYF. So, welcome Yvonna, Nigel, and Ehsan, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Jessie,
Thank you
for
so
inviting
much,
us.
Jessie, for having us.
Great. So before we dig deeper into this topic, I'd love for our audience to have a little bit more context about your working environments and why the topic of managing remote teams is relevant for your work. Let's start with Yvonna.
Thanks, Jessie. Managing remote teams is so important for the work that I oversee at IYF. In my role, I oversee our finance and administration functions, which is performed by a global and very much a remote team. The majority of our team is actually not based at headquarters. We have one person based remotely in the US, and the rest of the staff are all based across oceans and time zones. And for me, it's so important that every individual in the team feel valuable and that they are connected to part of being one large global team.
Awesome, thanks. Ehsan, how about you?
So Greenbox, when me and my brother started, we were working, studying in University of Nottingham, UK. So we have a very international team. Few people are in Italy, many people are in Pakistan. So it's more of a remote team, and we kind of manage this very virtually. So our experience since last 2 years has been there have been challenges, but we've learned how to work around remote teams who are based in different time zones. But we're managing it well, and and through this virtual learning series today, I'll be able to share some experience.
Great, thank you. And Nigel?
Yes, so 9 Miles Project has been based in Cape Town, but over the past 2 years, we've branched out to 2 new locations, one 4 hours away, one 8 hours away. And so working with remote teams is so important for the effectiveness of the delivery of the programs in the project. At the same time, also the reporting side, so that we can measure the social impact successfully and also adjust to see what works and what doesn't work. So it's kind of key for me to having that boots on the ground to make a effective social impact in those communities that we reach.
Great, thank you. So we've got a lot of great experience in this conversation when it comes to managing remote teams. So speaking of that experience, what are some unique challenges that social entrepreneurs should keep in mind when they're working with remote team members? I'll open that up for anybody.
Coming from a developing country, access to internet and even in terms of for women, for female staff members, it's kind of difficult to go out and go to an internet cafe to work. So having your own device or a computer or an internet device is at times challenging. For not everyone in the team can afford a computer, a personal computer on their own. So things like that. So then you have to think innovatively and kind of think out of the box to help those team members, and because we don't want to limit the opportunity only for those who have access to a computer or internet. And being a social entrepreneur, we don't have enough money to buy someone a new laptop. So at times we have to think around, gather some thoughts, some friends need to come in, things like that.
Yeah, if I can just piggyback on what Ehsan is saying is that, and sometimes also the resources, besides the internet connectivity, is that when they don't have resources even to a laptop, so just getting tech savvy or computer literacy is also a challenge, because sometimes it's there, but then you have to train them up to kind of utilize the web, emailing, the online platforms that you can communicate effectively.
Yeah, great points. Anything you wanted to add, Yvonna?
These are our social entrepreneurial experts, so I agree with what both of them said.
Yeah, I think access to technology, and not just the access, but the technology literacy, are both really, really critical barriers. And so it's good to both. I do want to talk about the solutions that are tech-based, but also get some thoughts from all of you as we go through this conversation about some of the solutions or approaches to working with remote teams that could be used that aren't as reliant on technology, at least in the time period that it takes to get more accessibility and be able to get people to build their tech literacy skills. So thinking about that, I'd love to hear what are some of the tools, systems, or processes that each of you use to manage remote team members. So this could be tech-based or not tech-based. What are some of the things that have worked well for you?
We are using Google Suite, in which we use Google Drive, Google Forms, and Google Meeting Space, and things like that. Since Microsoft does offer a lot of things are free on Microsoft Suite as well, but Skype for Business and these things, then we need to buy subscriptions. So it's best we are right now working with Google only. So a lot of like we've created online reporting templates, so everyone just fills in, and they're live documents, so everyone can see along during the meeting and things like that. Also, we use this tool which we've created ourselves. It's more of a dashboard where people can put their time tracks, like what they're working on. Since it's a volunteer organization, we don't have to pay anyone, so we don't have to time the money part for it, but still how much time you're putting during the week in this particular work. So we've created time tracks.
Great. What are some other processes or systems that you all are using to work with your remote teams?
For myself, I had to find ways because with my remote staff, they're still being empowered on the literacy side. And what I done, because I visit every 6 to 8 weeks, which is quite long, I kind of print out forms for the team to fill out, because they still, they're getting into the online and the tech compatibility space. So they kind of write out a report, old school, and they kind of take a picture of it, or they go to an internet shop where they scan it and they email it. And so that's one of the ways I've done so far with empowering still, remote teams to that level.
That's a great way to bridge kind of access to technology and literacy and still get documentation of what you need. Yvonna? And
I would just add, even IYF being a global organization, and many of the places we work, of course, technology and electricity can be challenges, and connectivity. A couple of things that we've used to provide access to the remote teams include more recently we've started using Microsoft Team sites, and then in addition to that we use our Dropbox files that allows everyone to have access even from their mobile devices.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, and a lot of these tech tools have mobile apps, so that's another thing. I think in a lot of contexts, people are leapfrogging technology, so they're going right past having a personal computer to just having a smartphone. And as that becomes more and more common, it's great that there's already integration of a lot of tools, and that you can do quite a bit from a smartphone and without even having to go to a laptop in between.
Yeah, Jesse, if I may add, we've also kind of hosted all our policy documents and our internal documents on this Google Drive, and it's password-based, so everyone has like partial access to what we think they should be able to access. Mm-hmm. So that's also one way of, they don't have to chase us for any document. Everything is on the Google Drive. So yeah, even at IYF, we have an internal server like that, so that's really helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point. Maybe to follow up on that, this is not just about the information in the documents, but I'm curious, how do you make sure that remote team members aren't feeling isolated, whether it's the access to information or the access to other people, or feeling like they're actually a part of a team?
Well, I could share that I think that's the number one complaint of remote staff oftentimes, is feeling isolated and not feeling connected. And I think that the best way to overcome that is in the course of the day. If you think about where you go, the location you report to every day for your business or your work, there are people that you see. There are just natural, organic interactions that you have with people to say good morning. And I think the more that we embrace that approach with our remote teams, whether it be just an informal check-in just to say, hey, how's it going? Providing them with updates, thinking it's a shift in our perspective so that we are being very purposeful to include them throughout the course of the day.
That's great. Thanks, Yvonna.
Yeah, one of the things I do is kind of send a voice note or a video actually to them on a daily basis, just so that they know that they have access to me at any time. I prioritize, when they message me, to respond promptly, and then just trying to schedule that video, virtual, face-to-face meeting with them every day, so that they know that although you far, you at the same time near as well, and they're kind of high priority in your organization and in your life as well.
Right. We've created a WhatsApp group. Instead of creating just an email channel, we've created WhatsApp group. So we kind of share, like nobody has a proper workspace station. So wherever they're working from, they kind of share #workspace. So we all share our kind of workstation pictures or something new that day, like a motivational or learning experience. It's just to keep that informal channel also going on. Otherwise, they feel very left out if we don't interact with them.
I love these strategies, and so it sounds like the being intentional and recognizing that there is that divide, and coming up with creative ways, whether it's the WhatsApp group and having your # check-ins, or sending them short video or audio messages. Those are some really great and creative ways to engage the staff, help keep them from feeling isolated. And also it speaks to the organizational culture a bit. So following up on that, I'm also curious on any insights from you all about how can you make sure that remote team members are really connected to organizational culture, both in terms of adopting that culture as well as being able to contribute to it, especially if you have some of your team that does meet physically or works in the same space, and other members who are mostly or always remote.
It is indeed a big challenge. It's something like, I'm sure it would be the most difficult thing to achieve, because I'm sure we can share policy documents and kind of orient them about that, but still, until you are not physically meeting, you kind of not interact enough to kind of pick the cultural aspect of it. But still, I would say that like, of course, going live in the morning, like having a 15 minutes informal session about talking about like for instance, in IYF we have 10 minutes of what we say, brainstorming or briefing on what happened in the last meeting, and then building upon that. These are kind of the organizational, cultural elements which one has to pick on. Of course, it's a big challenge because they kind of not embrace fully the culture of the organization while they're not physically here, because because it's the environment which impacts. So it's just the virtual connection which we have through which we are maintaining that cultural element. But we have policies in place, we like code of conduct and things like what you can say online, what you cannot, and how respectful you have to be towards the other colleagues. So it's kind of, and above all, it's best that it should be an inclusive process where you involve them equally to come up with suggestions, and because it's more of a startup and we're growing together and we're friends, because initially you kind of have a team which you all gel in well and there's no hierarchy. So everyone is contributing towards the larger goal of creating that organizational culture. So we all together are putting the pieces, that I would say.
Awesome.
One of the things we had to do was we actually create the same space that we started out with, and when we branched out into the other locations, we had to kind of duplicate that space, make it creative, make it scenic. So as the person was, working remotely, they kind of feel that they're in the same environment as they would be at kind of like the headquarters. And also one of the things we have, because we are use surfing as a medium, is that there's a time off. So whenever the weather's good or the waves are good, there's a time off, and you need to kind of record your time off. And so kind of like it's the WhatsApp informal space, where you kind of share your videos. Okay, this is what I done today, or this is what's going on here. There's some good coffee, and then of course just having that structure of the week, for everybody to plug in. But I think it's just sharing moments, I guess, that really creates that culture, of what one stands for. Yeah.
And I would just add that when it comes to culture, I think it works well to identify, what are the things that are more so structured, such as policies or some of the meetings that need to take place, as well as things that are unstructured or more informal. And there, I think it works best to, one, walk the talk. So it's much more natural to talk culture when it's actually what people are seeing every day in their interactions. And secondly, I think it's really important, particularly as businesses grow, and you may start to have staff that are based remotely that are going to become supervisors of a team, to really talk through what's important, what are things that you want them to uphold, so that regardless of which location you do go to, there's the same common thread and theme in terms of the culture that you're wanting to create.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So I kind of second Yvonna on that, because it is about walking the talk part, because it's just like I've seen people take advantage of being remote staff also. It's not always just the employer or the people on this side. It's because they might not get up in the morning on time or are very lenient about the attendance policy and things like that. So at times you have to kind of take that approach where both formal as well as informal channels are used. Yeah, so I kind of agree with Yvonna.
Great, thank you. And Yvonna, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit and ask you to share some of what you've done in terms of including the finance and administrative staff from field offices, particularly when it comes to developing staff and some of our internal trainings.
Sure. One of the things that, I would say this year in particular, but I felt that it was long overdue. We have staff that start out as finance and administration officers in our country offices, and then over the past year in particular, we've had staff overseas and at headquarters that are taking on more of a management and supervisory role. One of the things we did this year is a 3-part series on supervisory training. And a specific, I think the third session on that was actually supervision or leadership in a global workplace. And this was designed to empower and position all of the finance managers to supervise staff not only based in the office with them, but staff that are based remotely, and to be really thoughtful and intentional and purposeful about that approach. So that's something that I think has been really well received. We actually had one of our remote finance managers participate in that, as he's overseeing, I think, 3 or 4 of the country finance staff. And I think that's helped really, really well. And then the other thing I'll say that is more on the informal side, there are times throughout the day where we may just decide to have a little bit of fun with the team in HQ, and we'll send a group Skype message to see who of the finance staff might be online, and just like invite them to join in. And it's a very ad hoc thing, but it's another way to just grab people in the moment as you would if they were sitting there with you, and make them feel part of the team.
Great. And I'll add to that as well that one thing I've seen done really well that I think was super helpful, that was led by Yvonna in the past, is also when we needed to do internal trainings. So for example, related to fraud and awareness and prevention. Yvonna was very intentional about actually including the remote staff in not just joining virtually and listening and being participants, but being active participants, and actually having different remote staff leading certain activities or parts of it. So they were also contributing to that. And I think that also really is another way of walking that talk when it comes to culture. If the expectation is you want people to be active, proactive, participate, and connected, then I think it's really important to think of all the different ways that you can make that happen, whether it's in formal training spaces or informal quick Skype chats or WhatsApp messages.
And Jesse, if I could just build on to that really quickly, thank you for mentioning that. That training was the first training we had where we did have our remote field staff lead or co-facilitate the training. And in the surveys we received, even from headquarters staff, that was the highlight of the training. You know, fraud and ethics awareness may not seem like the most glamorous training that staff might go through in the course of the year, but it's a very important training when you're running a global business or any business nowadays. And to have staff that are remotely based not only be willing to lead that, but do their research so that they could talk about the importance of fraud and awareness and answer questions from the audience, I think was really transformational for the organization to do that.
Awesome. So I'm also curious, you all kind of mentioned different ways of connecting with people throughout the day, which can be a challenge when you're working across time zones. So maybe particularly for Ehsan and Yvonna, since you have teams that are spread all over the world, what are some things that you are keeping in mind, or how are you managing communication with team members when the beginning of your workday may be the end of their workday, or maybe the middle of the night for them?
So we kind of record every session we have, like we do. Okay, so we don't use these lower meeting things. We kind of go Facebook Live in our group. So it kind of goes, it's in their newsfeed then. So whatever time of the day they want to see it, they can. But we always recapture through minutes, which are on our live Google document. So they can go and see what are the action items for that day. So since our organization is very remote in its structure, so we do not expect everyone to work on a day's notice. So we kind of have to think way ahead, like at least for 2 weeks ahead of time, in terms of how much people should be contributing towards a certain action item which we are going to work on. We also have this thing that if we have to urgently meet on something and talk about that, we just give each other a call. I know it sounds very informal, but I know the social enterprise and the entrepreneurs which will be listening to us, not everyone has these many policies already in place or formal structures in place. So if you really have to get the work done, pick up your phone, reach out to them, and get it done, you know, that kind of behavior also at times. But we do that, we record our sessions so people can see later.
And I would just second what Ehsan said about getting on the phone. For me, I can say what doesn't work or what hasn't worked in my experience is relying too much on email when you're working with remote teams. For me, it's all about using Skype, phone, WhatsApp, you name it. There are so many technology options that are available to us that we should make every effort to have conversations with our remote teams. And from there, it's just about time management. So managing and working with colleagues that are across different time zones, I will structure my time so that I'm prioritizing the first 2 hours of every morning to respond to any requests, get on any calls with our overseas teams. And then there are a couple that the time zones are so significant that I'll actually stay up late at night and focus on those. And I think it's important to have a balance such that it's give and take. It's not constantly there having to stay late to get on calls with headquarters. Sometimes we need to stay late as well. So just keeping that balance and making sure that they're feeling supported and that we keep track of our time. And I'm very particular about making sure that we don't cause a 1 to 2 business day delay as a result of not prioritizing requests that come from our overseas offices.
That's great. And I think that balance and give and take also ties back, of course, to organizational culture as well, that, you know, if the expectation is always you will meet when it's convenient in my time zone, that you know, sets a tone for the culture, doesn't it? Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, in what ways have you either shifted or have you structured, say, regular team meetings in order to accommodate or adjust for having remote teams? Like, do you meet differently? Do you manage your meetings differently because you have remote team members?
I can answer. Yes. So initially, I started out trying to have weekly check-ins with all of the individual staff that I was overseeing, and that soon turned out to be unrealistic because of how many offices we have. So instead, we have a monthly global team meeting that takes place earlier in the morning so that it is in the afternoon for the majority of our offices. There is one office that is about 10 hours behind us, or ahead of us, I mean, so they end up being on the call from, I would say, like 4 in the afternoon. But that's once a month, and it's earlier in the morning, so our team in Baltimore, they get up early, they get to this meeting, and the teams in the field are still fresh enough that they're actively participating. And I think that's worked really well because it is also an opportunity for them to learn from each other. So again, rather than the communication or direction constantly coming from your headquarters, give your different remote teams an opportunity to solve each other's problems, and you can actually learn in the process as well.
I would just add that as a leader, or if you're in a leadership position, you need to compromise way more than others. Like, I'm in States and the rest of the people are in Pakistan or UK and places like that. They have lesser time difference. So I get up at 5:30 for a meeting when we have. So I'm just trying to say that if you're in a leadership position, you need to compromise more. Don't be super rigid and don't expect because and one more thing, my team is more volunteer, so we don't want to make them run away. We're not paying them anything.
Very important. Very important.
Yeah, so at times you don't have to be rigid at all for such things. Yeah.
Great. So one other question I had was kind of going more to maybe some of the challenges, and particularly what we talked about earlier, in that access to technology. Tech literacy can be a big barrier to overcome, but also just, you know, you don't have the luxury with remote team members of walking across the office to talk to them or check in. So if any of you have had the challenges of, say, team members who are unresponsive or uncommunicative for extended periods of time, I'd be curious how you handle that kind of situation, or are there systems or processes you use to try to, you know, avoid that happening in the first place?
I had a challenge with my remote staff going rogue or just unresponsive. But one of the things is when when we came into set up shop, that you kind of build relationship with stakeholders and partners, and with these individuals. So you're just getting more eyes and ears on the ground. So I had a few times, that my staff just 7 days, no feedback, nothing, unresponsive. But then I would call on somebody that's really close by, and kind of like to check up what's the situation and so forth, to give me kind of feedback, because one doesn't know, it could be a serious matter that has arisen. And from that first instant that had happened, I thought to actually kind of build just like ambassadors, and kind of maybe just mentors or local mentors or coaches to my staff there, so that when anything does happen, that I do have at least have 1 or 5 points of contact, so that I can actually just know what's actually happening and I can assist in any way.
That's great. Any other suggestions, things that have worked before or that you would recommend for kind of managing that sort of situation?
One idea I can share, I have one remote staff member that's based out in sub-Saharan Africa, and there was a period of several, I think it was 3 or more days, that I realized we weren't able to get a hold of the person on Skype. There wasn't responsiveness to the approval requests that were being routed. And, my first place, the first place I went is, there's got to be, hopefully nothing's wrong. I didn't jump to any assumptions. And eventually I got a hold of him via WhatsApp. WhatsApp seems to work no matter what's going on. And what we agreed to after that, what had happened, unfortunately, is there was some kind of electricity issue as well as an internet. The service provider went down in the area. And what we agreed to is that if that happens in the future, just to send a notice within 24 hours, just a quick, whether it's WhatsApp or some other form, just to let us know what's going on so that we can be prepared. So just having an expectation with your teams of how frequently you'd like them to check in can also help with that.
Plus, I agree with Yvonna on that. Do not jump on assumptions. We tend to say that, that person doesn't want to work with us anymore or something like that. It could be any personal emergency and things like that. So it's always best to give other person the space and come up with the solution, like mutually agree when to check in and when not to and things like that. So no assumptions, right?
Yeah, that's great. Definitely. Very important. So to kind of wrap up, I'd love to hear any last thoughts on, let's start with something, recommendations, advice on things that work particularly well when it comes to managing remote teams.
One I would share, I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's worked really well with our remote and global team, is having a monthly team meeting for the global team. This is an opportunity to provide updates to the team of what's happening in your headquarters. Also let them provide updates to you about what's going on in their various locations. And then you can structure the time such that you can address, problem-solving topics. And that provides, for instance, maybe a person, I'm just throwing these out as an example, in Mozambique can provide a solution that will work for somebody based in South Africa. And they feel valued and that they're able to contribute. So I think creating a space for a monthly global team meeting to make everyone feel connected and part of being one team that's really competing to win and to be successful together is very helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, Yvonna.
So what we do is that we just don't want each of us to know each other as a job title only. So we do brown bag presentations initially. So everyone on the team get to know more about your routines, friends, hobbies, even about your family and all things like more of your social setup, like what environment you actually work in. So then we can really relate to you and understand. That's how we can stay relevant to their life, So I've in our WhatsApp group, even right now, one of the fellows writing hey, how's your baby? Because they get to know each other more. So it's not that you're working as well, but this friendly culture always helps, You become more responsible because you're kind of now you have more stakes there, because there's some personal relation also involved. Yeah.
Awesome.
And because we in youth and community development, I think really the instant WhatsApp videos and images, our remote staff reports, gives an awesome indication of kind of the social reach and social impact that we're doing. And I just love that it's catching the moment there, you know, it's instant. And because we're also telling the story on social media and getting more people to support our cause and things like that, when we get that, you know, it could be instantly uploaded and things like that. So people is following the story, you know, and it's not like something that happened 2 weeks ago. It kind of happened this morning or this afternoon. It's instant, it's real, it's tangible. People can relate to it. And if there is something that is a call out, people can respond immediately to it. So I love that.
Great, thanks. So my last question is, do any of you have any recommendations for pitfalls to avoid when it comes to managing remote teams, either from your own experience of things that you've tried that haven't worked or things that you've seen tried that you think aren't as effective?
I can share two.
Go ahead, Yvonna, sorry. Yeah.
One is with remote teams, and this can even be somebody based domestically in the same country as you that's just not in the office every day. There can be a tendency to default to email. And I think, you know, even if the person is emailing you, being intentional to aim to have a conversation. Don't use email instead of having conversations, and I find it's a lot more effective. It gives you an opportunity to have that interpersonal connection Ehsan was mentioning earlier, where you can ask about family, friends, life. So that's one. And then the second pitfall that I've observed is mandating weekly check-ins. I think that can be well-intentioned so that we're keeping updated on our to-do lists and things like that, but it can also feel forced and unnecessary to your remote staff.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I would just add that be as comprehensive as possible, because it's not, you can't really interact with them every day. You have your own to-dos to do. They have their own to-dos to do. So whenever you're meeting, kind of think beforehand, like what you really want them to work on and vice versa. So it has to be more of a comprehensive and useful discussion rather than be on call for an hour and didn't really get much out of it, you know? So yeah, think beforehand.
Great.
I also had to move away from, you know, with our kind of headquarters and all our staff and majority, you know, of beneficiaries that from the 9 to 5, and kind of like pinning that on the remote staff to say like, you know, you have to be active, you know, for the whole day instead of, and I found that it didn't work so good. So kind of shifted to kind of have rather goals and projects to be accomplished, you know, however, and kind of work best, yeah, because in the beginning it was a bit frustrating, you know, that we have this side and they have to adopt the same culture and kind of just to be active and busy. So yeah, just watch out for that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Excellent advice from all of you. And speaking of advice, if anyone is interested in knowing more about this topic of managing remote teams, there are lots of resources online that you can check out. We've found a few such articles. If you look up challenges related to working with a remote team, there are any number, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 challenges depending on the article, but some really great advice out there in terms of things to be considering when it comes to working with remote staff and volunteers. And we know that not everybody has the luxury of being able to use tech-based solutions, but for those of you who have teams that have more access to technology, or if you're considering moving in this direction, we've collected some ideas of some great tools that can be useful to consider. And of course, our panelists talked about a few of these already, but I'll mention that when it comes to virtual meetings, lots of platforms that are quite popular work really well, and some of them are free. There's Zoom, Skype, GoToMeeting, Google Hangouts, of course. We're actually using Zoom right now for this session. When it comes to collaboration and project management, there are a lot of great productivity apps out there. A lot of them, you know, work seamlessly between smartphones and computers and can be integrated with each other as well. And so these can be really great tools to check out, such as Slack, Trello, Asana, Basecamp, Evernote, and OneNote. And I think Yvonna mentioned using Dropbox, and Ehsan uses Google Drive, and there's also Box.com if you're looking for great tools to use when it comes to sharing files with each other. And one element that can be really challenging is scheduling, and so there's some great tools out there you can use, such as Doodle or Sign Up Genius, to check people's availability for meetings and events, as well as to, say, sign up for one-on-one check-ins and that kind of thing. And Google Calendar has scheduling functions as well. So these are just a few that we use and like and are aware of and come highly recommended from other social entrepreneurs. And two that aren't on this list but that were mentioned in our discussion today that I wanted to call out are, of course, WhatsApp. I don't know how I managed to miss putting that on this list because WhatsApp is being used in so many places and in so many creative ways, so it's an excellent tool. And Facebook Live. So I really liked what Ehsan mentioned about having, if you're using Facebook groups to help manage your team, actually recording sessions using Facebook Live in the group. So it's only group members that have access to it, but you've got that record there in case somebody missed a meeting or a discussion. I think that's another creative way to use tools that maybe are more accessible to people and are free. So those are just a few ways to start on this topic, and we hope that you found this useful and interesting as you're thinking about your own challenges of managing remote teams. So I'd like to do one more round of thank yous to the American Express Foundation and Laureate International Universities for their support of the YouthActionNet virtual learning series. And if you want to keep in touch with YouthActionNet, you can subscribe to our newsletter at www.youthactionnet.org/subscribe. And you can find us online on various social media channels. We're at YouthActionNet on Facebook, Twitter, and we have a YouTube channel as well. If you enjoyed this video, we encourage you to check out the other learning videos on our YouTube channel. And one more thank you to my wonderful panelists, Ehsan Gul, Nigel Savel, and Yvonna Stevens. I really appreciate your insights into this topic, and thank you to everyone for joining us on this video. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.